Welcome to the Cambridge Financial Podcast with Bert Salazar, CEO at Cambridge Financial Partners, LLC. This podcast is all about tax-preferred retirement planning, economics, financial risk management, and achieving a risk-free and successful financial life. Now, your host, Bert Salazar. Bert Salazar. Bert Salazar.
Hey, good day everyone. Welcome to the Bert Salazar Retirement Show. My name is Bert Salazar and I will be the host, as I am every single week with each and every one of you. And I want to thank you all again for being so loyal to this podcast and to all the information that, we provide on a regular basis. And, we're having some major challenges in the United States and throughout the globe. But obviously I tend to concentrate primarily in the United States. So this episode is episode 177. And the title for this episode, which is a sad title, but sometimes, it is what it is The Economic Shit Has Hit the Fan. So I'm going to be kind of going through a lot of the information that I have been gathering for the last 2 weeks or so regarding the economy and where we're at. And what are some of the experts predicting? Although many of the experts that we all listen to or hear on a regular basis never kind of forecasted what's happening today in the United States and throughout the world. So I'm going to be giving you factual information. And then from there you have to, take it and make up your own mind as to which way you want to go. When it comes to your family and your finances. So, as you all know, by now the U.S. economy is in a downward spiral and is spiraling out of control, and nobody knows when it's going to stop. If you take a look at the stock market, it's actually in bear market territory as we speak, and it's crashing big time. Also take a look at the crypto market is crashing as well. And one of the main reasons why the crypto economy is crashing is that because it is such a new economy, it kind of has to follow someone. So it follows primarily the NASDAQ. And as the NASDAQ goes, so do cryptocurrencies, and that would include Bitcoin and so forth. Now, once maturity takes place in the crypto world, you're going to see that, Bitcoin and many other currencies in the crypto world are going to lead by example, and they're going to be a hedge to inflationary trends throughout the United States and the world, but we're not there yet, so we just need to keep an eye on it. Now, if you're looking at cryptocurrencies and you say, well, where am I going to be at 6 months or a year from now? I would not want to make a bet. But if you look down the line 10 years from now, 5 years from now, then I would venture to say it would be a good bet. And this is no financial advice. I'll just tell you what it is that I do from a business and retirement standpoint, and from a retirement standpoint. Also, by the same token, as you very well know, 401k accounts are being diminished dramatically on a daily basis. I would argue that many of you, when you receive your 401k statement, unless you get it online, you're petrified about opening the envelope. Something similar to what happened back in 2008, where, I used to go visit clients and they would bring me their stacks of statements inside their sealed envelope, and they were too afraid to even open the envelope at that time. Well, the same thing is happening today. Now, if you're in retirement, that's a major challenge. Now, if you have, 20 years to retirement, then you should be okay. Actually, you should be buying more and more today because at the end of the day, this will end at some point in time in the future. We just don't know we just don't know when. Now, if you take a look at inflation, it's fast approaching 9%. But as you all know, it's much higher than that. So what I like to do, because you hear the government puts out all of these numbers, and it tells you that it's 8.6% for the month of March, which is closer around up to 9%. But in my argument is that it's a lot higher than that. And why is that? Well, take a look at the following cost of basic goods in the United States and throughout the world, but primarily in the U.S. Now, a barrel of fuel, oil, is up 107%. Gasoline is up 48%. Airfare is up 38%. Eggs, when you go to a store to buy eggs, that's up 32%. Chicken is up 17%. Ground beef is up 14%. Bacon up 15%. Apples 6%. Other fruits 6-7%. Fish and seafood up 12%. Groceries up 12%. New cars and trucks up 13%. Electricity is up 12%. So if you were just to add all of those items and you divide them by the number of items, you will notice that the cost of inflation is actually almost double what the government is reporting to each and every one of us today. The reason why the government is reporting almost 9% is because they're taking a look at the whole spectrum of goods and services that are sold in the United States on an annual basis. But when you take a look at the important and essential items that we all use in the United States and that we purchase in the United States, the inflationary rate to that is much, much higher than what is being reported. So don't let anyone kid you about the 8.9% because it really doesn't exist. Now, you know, they say that those that forget history are bound to repeat it. So let's kind of revisit history, but I'm not going to go back 5, 10, 15, 20 years, or 30 years for that matter. Let's just go back to January of 2021. And that was a month that President Biden took office. Inflation at that point in time was at 1.4%. In March of 2021, it was at 2.6%. In July of 2021, it was already at 5.4%, but according to the head of the Treasury and the head of the Federal Reserve, it was just going to be temporary. And even the president many, many times, you know, talked about inflation just being temporary, although a lot of the experts were saying something totally different. Fast forward to November of 2021, was at 6.8%. In March of 2022, was at 7.9%. Inflation in April of 2022 was at 8.3%. And last but not least, inflation in May of 2022 was at 8.6%. So that tells you how much inflation has gone up just in a matter of a year and 6 months, and it's going to get even worse moving forward, especially now we're getting into the summer months. Now, for those of you that may be a little bit confused about what inflation totally is, well, to me, it's just a silent killer because inflation is not tax deductible. So therefore, if you have an inflation of 8.6%, you know, think about investing money in the stock market. Not only do you have to earn sufficient rate of return to stay either at par with inflation or ahead of inflation, so you would have to be earning at least 8.6%, but on top of that, you have to earn more in order to pay the tax liability on those investment returns in order to break even at 8.6% of inflation rate. So that is not happening in any single portfolio today, and that's a major, major problem. But the true definition of inflation, and don't let anyone kid you around because, you know, the politicians do a very good job in brainwashing Americans every single day. Inflation is nothing more, nothing less than too much money chasing too few goods. And that's something, let me repeat that again. Inflation is nothing more and nothing less than too much money chasing too few goods and services. So if you take a look at what has happened over the last 18 months, the last two Treasury money prints, based on the bailouts, were totally unnecessary by the Biden administration. And a lot of experts kept saying that there was no need for us, to have another economic bailout. But obviously, that was a promise that he made during the campaign. He wanted to keep it, and at the end of the day, the road to hell is paved with a lot of good intentions, and Americans are paying for those intentions today, and they will be paying for that for many, many years to come. Now, something that I think is very critical, and this is something that politicians don't realize, especially the demagogues of politics, is that Americans are not stupid. They know Putin has nothing to do with what's going on in the United States. As a matter of fact, I would argue, the U.S. placed penalties on Russia's economy to kind of bring it down. So 200,000 barrels of oil daily does not have a major impact to gas prices. And those are the the 200,000 barrels of oil that we were generating from or receiving from Russia every single day. That is nothing. That can be replaced with anything. So at the end of the day, it really has no negative impact on gas prices. Economic policies, on the other hand, do have a tremendous impact on gas prices and so forth. And the economic policies of the Biden administration, and I'm not taking sides, I'm just giving you the good, the bad, and the ugly. You take it and understand it the way you want to. It's okay. But the economic policies of the Biden administration have created tremendous damage to the U.S. economy today. One of the first things that he did when he took power last year is he canceled the Keystone pipeline, but he went ahead and authorized the one going from Russia to Germany. So, how does that figure into this entire equation? Also remember that the pricing of gas or oil is based on futures. So if the economy is forecasted for the price of oil to be is a supply and demand issue, so if the supply is going to be lesser because of economic decisions made by a government, then obviously that is being priced into the future cost of oil. So that's why oil and the price has been increasing every single month in the United States, even and way before Putin decided to invade Ukraine. So don't let any of these politicians, whether they happen to be on the left or they happen to be on the right, try to fool you along those lines, because Americans are not stupid, and I'm certain that you guys are not. Now, the Federal Reserve is now doing something, finally, but you gotta be careful what you wish for, because they just went ahead and increased interest rates by 75 basis points, and they've done a couple of other increases in 2022 in order to slow down inflation and or attempt to alleviate inflation. But it's something that they should have seen a year ago. And they should have started to do something then, and not now, because it's going to take quite some time, for those 75 basis points and all those increases to kind of make an impact. But when interest rates go up, a lot of things happen. Some are good and some are not so good. So for instance, home prices are now at a standstill and or slowing down a little bit. And that may be a good thing. Now, fewer mortgages are being drawn now due to higher interest rates. So because of the fact that interest rates is going up, then the cost of servicing a debt and the cost of borrowing is now higher. And a lot of Americans cannot afford that increase. So therefore, they're not buying as many homes as they did up until the end of 2021. Now, large corporations, on the other side of the coin, will also slow down growth and or expansion due to the cost of money rates, because everything is financed, especially at that level when you have, major corporations borrowing millions and millions of dollars on a daily basis in order to either expand or grow or increase inventory or whatever that may be. Bankruptcies, something that nobody's talking about, but keep an eye on this because bankruptcies will increase dramatically to homeowners that have flexible rate mortgages. See, when you buy a flexible rate mortgage, the mortgage company or the bank is going to give you a teaser, what they call a teaser rate, which are going to give you a fairly low rate that you're going to jump all over. But then those rates in a period of 12 to 18 to 24 months are gonna be reinstated to the original rates. And guess what's going to happen? All those flexible mortgages that you were saving money on, and you had either interest-only mortgage or you had a flexible rate permanent mortgage, now they're going to go through the roof. So Americans are going to find themselves in international waters on a dinghy with no paddles, and therefore they're going to have to go through foreclosures, or they're going to have to go through bankruptcies. Also, the potential increase in bank interest rates, because you'd say, well, Bert, if interest rates are going up, then I would imagine the bank is going to increase the interest that they're going to be paying on my checking accounts, on my savings accounts, if I have a premier checking or savings, and or CDs. And yes, they will pay you a little bit more, but it will be minimal compared to the current inflation rate that we're living through in the United States today. Now, this is something that I've talked about in many other podcasts, and is that monetary policy in the United States is a Ponzi scheme. And it's been a Ponzi scheme since 1971. See, when our monetary policy did away from pegging the US dollar to gold, then the US dollar became, for all practical purposes, what is known as a fiat currency, which means it has no backing. Or the only backing that it has is a promissory note from the US government, which in the whole scheme of things, it used to mean something, but it doesn't mean that much today. So the inflationary trends, the economic policies, the decisions that the Federal Reserve and the Treasury has made over the years, they kind of control each and every one of us in whatever way they want to, and we're the ones paying the price for that. So, and by the way, that has happened under both Democratic and Republican control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency as well. So here is not one is more culprit than the other. Both of them are guilty of playing monetary policy that has created the Ponzi scheme that we're living through today. The fiat fraud, I always say, is alive and well. Print your way out of problems while destroying the middle class, and this is what it's doing every single day. Every time the U.S. Treasury has to go out and print money, it means that your money is worth less. The money that you have in your checking, savings, CDs, in your 401k, because you're going to need more dollars in order to make ends meet. And then when inflation hits, then Houston, we have a problem. And that's one of the major things that we're going through today. So if you're in retirement today, you have to be extremely careful, and you have to perform due diligence on every single economic decision you and your family are going to be making in the future. Now, if you take a look at the global economy, China has become the world leader in front of our eyes in economics, education, mathematics, science, and by the way, they also steal U.S. technology every single day. Anytime they have the ability to steal U.S. technology, they're going to do it, and they're going to do it for their own betterment and not for the betterment of the world. So their goal is to control the world. And for instance, by the year 2030, they're going to have total control of AI on a worldwide basis, and that would be artificial intelligence. So, what we in the United States are discussing gender and pronouns and all that crap, that we're going through in the United States, these kids in China and Russia and India and so forth, well, not Russia so much, but India and China, they're studying biology, they're studying mathematics, they're studying technology, and they're doing things that the U.S. students are not capable of doing. And that's why, we are so far behind in science and mathematics, because our education system today is a failure to the vast majority of Americans. So it's something that we all need to look at. Now, I would also argue that we lost the competitive war with China, when we shifted our manufacturing abroad. When we started to send all the manufacturing to China looking for cheaper ways of producing stuff, you got to be careful what you wish for, because you might just get it. So we shifted everything. We're totally dependent on China when it comes to the shipping and the purchase of goods and services. That it has become a major security issue for the United States of America. Now, everybody talks about Russia, and Russia is not a big deal. Yeah, they do have, nuclear weapons, but so do we. But at the end of the day, if you really look at Russia from an economic standpoint, their entire economy is actually smaller than that of New York. So just think about that. The entire Russian economy is smaller than New York's economy. So that ought to tell you, how dangerous Russia is from an economic standpoint to the world. Now, another thing that I see is politicians on both sides of the aisle, they want open borders. Now, the Republicans do a better job in saying, no, we don't. But some of those deeply ingrained in the Republican Party are all for open borders. Now, they don't tell you that, but in reality, they are. And the reason for that is simple: cheap labor. Because the largest corporations in America want cheap labor, and when you have open borders and you have millions and millions of immigrants coming into the United States every single year, legally and or illegally, then that's a great tool for American corporations and for world corporations that are working out of the United States, because it creates cheap labor. Now, cheap labor, on the other hand, it hurts African Americans, Hispanics, and most minorities. So, you're starting to see why is it that Mexicans are now totally against illegal immigration. I'm talking about Mexican Americans living in the United States. Because every time illegal aliens come through the borders, guess what? American companies are hiring them and paying them lower wages. And because of that, then the wages of traditional Americans and even Mexican Americans that now have been in the United States for many decades is suffering quite significantly. And the same thing can be applied to Cubans and or any other type of Hispanics and Asian Americans and so forth. Crime rate, another big issue that you see in economics. Now, it may not have, from a political standpoint, it may not have an impact on economics, but from an economic standpoint, it does, is that crime rate in Democratic-run cities is through the roof. Why? Well, simply because liberal policies on crime prevention, enforcement, legislation, and dismantling policing is hurting everything else. When people are afraid to go to a restaurant, to go to a movie, to go for a drive, the economics actually stops, and it damages everything else. So whenever you have a high crime area, you see a lot of poverty. Companies don't want to go into those areas. Take a look at Detroit. For decades, there are areas in Detroit that companies don't want to go in. They don't want to expand because of the fact that the crime rate is so high that they're not willing to take the liability from a business perspective. So at the end of the day, well, how do you fight the fraud and the manipulation and the robbery that politicians and the U.S. government is doing to all Americans in the United States? Well, I'm going to give you some blunt answers that you may or may not like, but it is what it is. Number one, you have to stop being stupid. If you have a brain, it was given to you for a reason, so use it wisely. So stop being stupid and just following what everybody else is doing. Stop being political. Yes, you may be a Democrat, you may be a Republican, you may be a Libertarian, you may be an independent. That's okay. But stop being political, because each and every party is going to do things that may be apropos, they may be correct, and they're going to do stupid things. When they do stupid things, call them out. That's your job. You're an American. You have power. You have control. So we think. So you have to stop being stupid. You have to stop being political. You also need to stop being a puppet, because the puppeteers at the top, that top 1%, the top 1% that happens to be in the White House or in the Senate or in the House of Representatives or the overall Congress, they are the puppeteers. We are the puppets. All of these people are making millions and millions of dollars a year, and inflation has no impact on them whatsoever, but it has on each and every one of us that happen to be in the middle class. And yet, we're always fighting each other like puppets, not understanding that somebody's pulling the strings, and the strings are being pulled by the puppeteers. Another big thing that you can do is you need to stop being brainwashed by social media. Every time you see a tweet, every time you see something on Facebook, every time you see something on Twitter, Instagram, any type of social media, your job is to question it. You have to question it, you have to do your research, and then you need to arrive at your own decision. Remember, and this is an old saying, most of the time when you follow the masses, the M is usually silent. So you're going to be following a bunch of asses, and if you follow a bunch of asses, guess what? You just became one of them. You also need to take control of your finances. You need to talk to people that are tax planners. You need to talk to people that are retirement strategists. You need to talk to experts in those fields, because hopefully they're going to guide you in the right direction, because you're not going to be able to do it by yourself. The economic world is too complex for you to try to do it on your own, because, when you make a decision on one side of the ledger, it could have a positive or a negative impact on the other side. But unless you're looking at your finances through a telescope as opposed to a microscope, you're never going to see the difference. And then last but not least, it's important that you peel the onion on all matters related to you, to your family, and your economic and political environment. Only then will you be free, because right now you think you're free in the United States, and if you happen to be part of the middle class, you're not. By the way, the best two places to be in the United States is either be very wealthy, upper middle class, or the very wealthy, or be very, very poor. If you're in the middle, like 96% of all Americans, which happen to be somewhere in the middle of the spectrum, then that's not a good place to be unless you have control of yourself, your family, and your finances. So for those of you that may want to pick my brain, feel free to call me, area code 786-766-1042. If you have any questions, or if you need some assistance in tax planning or retirement strategies, you feel free to send me an email. You can send me an email at Bert, B-E-R-T, at bertsalazar.com, B-E-R-T, S-A-L-A-Z-A-R.com. Again, Bert at bertsalazar.com. And always remember that my goal for you and for your family is to kind of help you change the way that you see things, as I have done here today in this podcast. Because when you change the way that you see things, the things that you do will be totally different. So if you change the way that you see things, the things that you see will change in front of your eyes. So I want to thank you all for giving me a few minutes of your time, and I'll talk to you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.